Yeah.
To the people that were just coming in, we were talking about the 2-day teaching series that's going on at the Brooklyn Institute for Social Research. Did I get that right?
Yes, you did, sir. Thank you.
Hey, look at that mouthful. Richard, you said you watched it. Do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I was hoping that we could sort of talk about something that you were talking about, Pat.
Yeah, totally.
Where there was at one point where you were asked a question sort of about it seemed almost like you were asked a question about like you talk more about how weapons influence the militarization of police, but you were kind of trying to more talk about how militarization of police is more of a constant, you know.
Yeah.
But there was one part where you said that you know there's this idea that the military is like more professional than police or better trained. You see it online a lot, right? You see it see it on maybe like on Twitter and you know people, veterans or military community saying like you know, the things that these police officers doing are doing in these videos. Like if we did it in Iraq or Afghanistan, we'd be charged with war crimes, you know.
Yeah.
So there's like this idea that like the military is like better trained, and in the military community, I mean, I'm a veteran, you know, like I know we definitely like saw ourselves as better than police, right?
Right.
But and then we also believe that too, like this idea that there was, you know, we're held to high standards. So the you know, law of armed conflict. We're all taught, you know, and this idea that you know Americans always treat like their prisoners well in war, and that's like what we do as a country. But I think it's definitely an idea. It's definitely something that we all, maybe a lot of us believe or you know are taught. But when you were saying that, like it just made me sort of think about how
Jumping.
Yeah, I'm going too. Made me think about how like actually that's kind of a myth.
Really?
Because it's something that we all believe, but how many Americans have been convicted of war crimes?
Wait, what's a myth? What's a myth? War crimes?
War crimes. That Americans like are, you know, overly concerned with war crimes and hold themselves to a high standard, and if an American soldier were to do something, you know, brutal to the enemy overseas, not legal in the eyes of international law, that they would be tried war crimes, right?
I'm scratching my like. I'm trying to think of like everyone I can think of is someone who was then pardoned, right? Like Haley after My Lai got pardoned, right? Didn't Nixon pardon him?
Right.
And
so
then,
if you start looking at this up, right? Yeah, you start looking this up. Yeah, the ones you can name, most of them did get off or were pardoned. When you start like actually, you know, there's a category in Wikipedia. It's like Americans charged with war crimes. It's like less than 12 people. And
they're all from Vietnam.
yeah, there's only there's like 2 from the Civil War. And yeah, it's crazy. And yeah, there's like the Leavenworth 10 and stuff, you know, but there's just not very many. And you would think, you know, so why is that? Like, why is there not very many Americans charged with war crimes? Like, is that because Americans don't do war crimes? You know, or is it because who is to enforce them? You know, who's to enforce that? Like in America, when the police brutalize someone, it's the people saying, "Hey, you brutalized my neighbor or my son or whatever. Like, don't do that. We don't like that. Stop that. I'm gonna get a lawyer." All this stuff, you know. Like it's the people who are brutalized who get to like voice those concerns. In a war, it's not the people. I mean, you have like there is a process for getting money for killing a civilian, that we use in Afghanistan a lot, but like generally it's if a soldier is to kill someone, in a way not legal under the law of armed conflict, like who's gonna support that? Who's gonna enforce that, right? It's the soldiers with him who have been trained that the small unit matters more than everything else in the entire universe.
I'm trying to think what happened to the people involved with Abu Ghraib.
Yeah, there was a few of them. There was 4 on that page, on the Wikipedia page from Abu Ghraib.
And they were only called out because it leaked to the media. Like the cat was out of the bag at that point.
They were poor people from rural parts of America in the National Guard who
were in over their heads.
Yeah, who I mean, what they did was horrific, and they deserved to be charged. But there were so many other people surely involved in that. Where was their leadership? You know, their officers who were in charge of them. Like, you know, these 4 people get scapegoated, and that's like 4 out of, you know, I mean, maybe twice that have been prosecuted and convicted. Steamed like since the whole war on terror, you know. And then you have the president, this culture of the president,
encouraging war crimes.
Not only encouraging war crimes, but but pardoning war criminals, and much of America supports it. And there's a study. If you look this up, there's a study that shows that if Americans think a war is just, then a plurality of them, like just over 50%, I guess, will excuse war crimes. And those are the ones who would admit it, you know. Like now, add some peer pressure and, you know, idle pressure and stuff, you know. So
survey bias, yeah.
This idea, I think, that the military is much more restrained than the police, especially right now when we're talking about, you know, actually dismantling some of these systems that encourage police brutality. Like it's a myth, and it's completely unhelpful, you know. And I think I'm just curious what you think about that, because you've seen so many of these connections between the military and the police, and not just recently, but back so long. Like,
wait, could I put a pin? Could I put a pin in chat's in Pat's response and read some things from chat really quick while you guys are running?
Yeah, go totally.
Ramsa points out a line that I love talking about, which is, what's that annoying line Mayor Pete used? I use weapons of war over there, so we would not have that weapon over here. Something like that.
Yeah.
Frito, remember it was Lenny England.
So yucky, right? Are we all in agreement that's a really yucky thing to say?
Yeah. Oh yeah, it's despicable. Yeah. Better to shoot their kids with M16s than our kids.
Yeah, like their streets, not our streets. Yeah.
Zenobius says Robert Bales got life in prison, but he's a fairly rare exception, and I think the extremely unequivocal nature of what he did helped the case against him. So it's only pure evil and not
Robert
evil.
Bales is a great example. Yeah, that's like over the top. Like only, you know, this cartoony manifestation of like evil will be charged successfully and convicted of a war crime by the military, you know? I mean, the military...
Is that a cash drop?
I still know his case, actually. Yeah, actually, I don't know.
Investigations to investigate these police officers, you know?
Right. But the name we just mentioned, Robert Bales, was he the one who was hunting Afghans for sport? Is that right? Forgive me if I don't remember the...
Yeah, I'm not familiar with
the
story
he wasn't
either.
for sport. I think he just... I don't know the sort of the why, but I think the basics are that he left his fob by himself one night, went into the nearby village and just murdered 4 or 5 people.
That's right.
Yeah. On me.
Blood, like while they slept. Where'd that come from? I mean, look at these Blackwater guys getting off, and look at you know, in Haditha is like probably one of the most famous besides Abu Ghraib. Like, you know, massacres in Iraq, and look how many of those guys got off. Like. But you just you're right. You keep seeing it on the internet. You keep seeing it on Twitter. All these military guys getting retweeted a bunch of times, you know, and by blue checks, you know, saying like, this would never happen in Iraq. You know, I would get charged with a war crime. This would never happen in Afghanistan. And it's a myth, not true.
So I'm thinking about the war crime thing too, and it's like I'm wondering about. Like I know that I'm thinking like the international, like the Hague, right, where it's like there's. I think the only white people who've been charged at The Hague have been like Balkan and specifically Serbian, if that's right. Maybe there's been a couple Croats.
What is The Hague?
So the International Criminal Court in The Hague in Belgium, right? Like where we're not signatories to this. So that's like the body that adjudicates international law.
Chopper coming towards the pig. You wanna kill him?
Oh, I do not have it. Let's see if we.
Well, it's you know the International Court of Criminals, right?
Yeah.
All right, Richard, do you mind?
Well, and that's another thing too. If Americans are, I'm coming towards your car. But if Americans are so concerned about war crimes, and if they're so, you know, in this concept of legal war and you know just war and whatnot, like, then why doesn't the American government recognize the jurisdiction of the ICCC?
Yeah. Hey, you want to buy and pop a UAV real quick? Yeah, sorry, keep going.
I think we actually have. I remember reading about this, and I know this isn't true, but like we actually have a contingency plan to invade The Hague if an American is charged there. I don't. That sounds like an urban myth, but it's not. But like, there's some sort of white paper. I have to find this where it's like if someone like we a couple of presidents have indicated this that if an American general is ever brought to trial or whatever, we will.
Doesn't seem unbelievable at all to me. Of course, there's plans for that. Why wouldn't the military have plans to protect their own top leadership from a foreign country?
I think it's just the mental image of our doing like an amphibious landing in Copenhagen or wherever the fuck. I'm very tired of it.
No, we invaded Iraq. Of course, we're gonna take out our generals from the Hague. Are you serious?
I mean, man, no, I know. I'm not. Yeah, totally. We haven't signed on the landmine ban. That's right. I think the landmine thing is because we say we need them to maintain peace in the DMZ. I think that's a specific example that we give, right? Maintaining that that's like the whole we need them to maintain that massive barrier between the DPRK and South Korea.
Pat, weren't you saying the last stream too that I was on that that the American way of war, isn't like this French advisor was observing Americans in the Revolutionary War or something and wrote about the American way of war and how the American way of war is actually like a guerrilla war with over-the-top responses.
Let me find this. Yes, that's exactly right. And the book is John Gringay's The First Way of War. I can send you the PDF if you want it. But here's the... I want to read you a quote from... There's a George Washington's letter. It's... I think it's the Sullivan expedition is the one. Yes, this is into the Lakes region to essentially just fuck up the Iroquois Confederacy, the Five Nations with the Haudenosaunee have done a bunch of different treaties, right, with one another, and some of them are still allied with the British and some aren't, whatever. Here's the instructions that this is George Washington. You read it in handwriting to General John Sullivan.
Did we just do really good?
We did pretty okay. Somebody got $1 million in like 5 minutes.
Here. I'm going to copy and paste this text into the chat because it's just so wild. Pop that in Discord. So this is the book is so here's the orders from John Sullivan again. This is against certain groups of Iroquois / Seneca. Forgive me, I'm again tired. I read about this in my book, but I'm forgetting a lot of the details. So this is the order, and you could read it in his handwriting. In May 1779. The expedition you are appointed to command is to be directed against the hostile tribes of the Six Nations, with their associates and adherents. The immediate objects are the total destruction and devastation of their settlements, and the capture of as many prisoners of every age and sex as possible. It will be essential to ruin their crops now in the ground and prevent their planting more. I would recommend that some post in the center of Indian country should be occupied with all expedition with sufficient quantities to detach to lay waste all the sediments around, with instructions to do it in the most effectual manner, that the country may not be merely overrun but destroyed. You will not by any means listen to any overture of peace before the total ruinment of their settlements is effected. Our future security will be in their inability to injure us, and in the terror with which the severity of the chastisement they receive will inspire them.
It's like something out of Judges.
Yeah, that's exactly. Yeah, so what he's basically saying is burn their villages, destroy their crops, leave them for a hard, northeastern winter. Do not listen if they try to sue for peace. Capture and or kill women, elderly, children, and animals. Enemy soldier incoming. Fucking George Washington, folks.
Hey, welcome, Lots. Good time to come in. Really uplifting.
Yes.
That was George Washington. That was George Washington.
There's a lovely book called George Washington, I think George Washington and the Indians that gets into this, but there's the Indian War of George Washington, it's the title of the book. But at some point, and there's actually a really complicated, interesting story in this because like Washington's had so one of the epithets or like the names that people would call that indigenous people of several nations called Washington was the town destroyer or the village burner. It's been translated in a bunch of different ways.
Wow.
But the thing that's really crazy is that it's a little unclear if he earned that name himself or also if one of his previous relatives had earned the name in yet another one of these scorched earth campaigns, like 60, 70 years prior, in which, if memory serves, I think this is in the Carolinas or maybe like Tidewater, Virginia. He basically invited a whole bunch of indigenous chiefs to parley and then just murdered them. So this is George Washington's ancestor basically just doing a straight up murder. And I think and Washington himself would use this title and also that heritage to refer to himself. So you would ask like indigenous chiefs to refer to him as the town burner and shit. But anyways, yeah, there's a letter from like well after this is like that line where Washington's like our future security depends on this. There's a line from like Seneca ambassadors coming to visit Washington after the U.S. has been established. And they begin their speech by saying, "We tell our children stories about you, and they cry, and our women weep because you're still remembered as the village burner." Really fucking George Washington. So yeah, that's the American way of war there. Like it's burning crops and shit, which I don't think is. I don't actually know a lot of the laws of war, but you can't destroy people's livestock, right? That's illegal, maybe.
No, yeah, you can't starve people. Starvation is not legal. I mean, of course, the things that we're saying are illegal were not around when George Washington was out there burning fields with the best of them, but...
You said something earlier, Richard, that really piqued my interest, and if you don't want to talk about it, I totally understand, but you mentioned soldiers discussing their own training versus the police. Would you be willing to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that's a great secret. I mean, there's the whole thing about the military, right? Is there's these like it's rivalries and hierarchies, you know,
right.
And so that extends out of the military too. You know, anyone in the military, you know, a Marine is going to think that he's better than a soldier or an airman or a sailor, right?
Right.
And but anyone in the military is going to think that they're better, than a civilian.
Really?
And civilians. So I think irrespective of how well they were trained or funded or whatever, I think the military would always feel superior to them. But I think there's a lot of resentment in the military, at least when I was in, because you would see police basically buy a bunch of gear. These police departments buy a bunch of gear that is like normally reserved for like your tier 1 assets in the military, so your special operations, your very well funded guys, and the rest of the military kind of looks up to those guys and wants that stuff too, wants to be them, wants to have that cool gear. And then they see the police but they don't get it, they don't have it, they're not special operators. If they want that stuff, they have to go try out and succeed, right?
Right.
Go do it. But then they see the police of Ferguson dressed up like SEAL Team 6.
Right.
They have through themselves.
Right.
Pointing their ARs in civilians' faces, and that's where some of this rift first started. Is seeing that they're like, holy shit, there's no, like the anger of seeing a police officer pointing their gun at a civilian's face, for no reason, unprovoked, is one thing, but then you look in the picture and you see him dressed up like, in a SEAL Team 6 costume. And if you're like if you're a soldier, a regular, line soldier or something, you're just gonna be like, why is he wearing that stuff? He doesn't get, he's just a cop from Ferguson, Missouri, like.
Broken window.
That's another thing. Like these, so since the 1033 program and all of these police departments all across the country, the only criteria needing to get most of this stuff is just, you have to prove that there's drug activity or whatever, So like anyone near any highway can say there's drug activity. But anyway, they get all the military gear from the 1033 program. And it's actually like, I started thinking about the 1033 program and I forgot where I was going with this. Anyway.
Right, about training, like access to gear and sort of like the judgments of superiority of military versus police or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that, the program to give, supposedly surplus gear to the police, surplus military gear the military doesn't need, has, it has encouraged resentment among the military for not having that, right?
Yeah.
And who's in the danger? Like, who's the person that, if need were to enter the equation, would actually need that equipment?
I don't
really want to compare that. I don't know if I'm comfortable comparing that.
Yeah. Understandable. Yeah, and I'm speaking from ignorance, so I could absolutely be
wrong.
No.
Well, I guess I wonder, it's like a category thing is what I wonder about, where it's like all these the craziness for the MRAPs, right? There's non-resistant armored personnel carrier or whatever that stands for, right? Where it's there's no I'm thinking what you're saying, Dan. There's no possible world in which a domestic U.S. police force is going to be worried about highly formed penetrators or whatever those shaped charges and IEDs and shit. And they know it, and so they get these things which cost half $500,000 a pop, and then they call them rescue vehicles just to justify having these things. It's crazy. I don't. And I feel it feels also once you have it, you're gonna want to use it. Is the other thing that keeps on. I find very hard to shake. Why not take it out and drive it over? They've done this, yeah.
Yeah, you don't just get a new toy and keep it in your garage. Right. I mean, I'm not just talking about anyone. I'm talking about the military. It does not do that. Police departments do not do that. That's not how it works.
Actually, as a very fair and welcomed. Oh, you already got one. Oh yeah. You drive Irene. That's a very welcomed check on our earlier conversation on war crimes.
Yes.
Zenobius comments, at one point American troops were killing an Iraqi civilian just at checkpoints every day on average. Aside from one Blackwater contractor who, like Bales, went extremely overboard with it, I don't think anyone has ever been charged for it. Even American cops wouldn't get away with that much. I think that's a fair point. I mean, police do kill a lot of civilians, but I think it's a fair point.
White.
Ramzad says, superiority requires training or respect, or there's no foundation in one's identity. It is meaning. It fights nihilism. I actually don't know what this means. 1030 makes former military feel like there is no point. Nihilism, dark absurdism.
I think what he's saying. Because if all these these material things, these weapons and these helmets and these vests and whatnot, if they all have emotional attachment to them,
He's here.
Status attachment. All right, moving, pushing. Ooh, you got him. Yeah, but so helmets and guns have an emotional attachment to them, not only just status in the military, but how your even your self-esteem, how you view yourself. And then you see someone someone you feel superior to, like some nobody in Ferguson, Missouri, who didn't join the military, who didn't sign up to go get shot at overseas, who's just, going out and, bullying black people and then going home to his wife in his comfy bed every night. It does encourage a feeling of nihilism, It's like, well, none of this matters, if that he can just do that, then why am I doing all this,
Right.
Ramza
continues that 1030 thought. 1030 makes more military feel like there's no point. Nihilism, dark absurdism. I mean, real military versus cops, and cops look like military with 1030, and they're flaunting military weapons.
Yeah.
I don't know. What is 1030? Do you mind illuminating?
Oh, yeah. So the 1033 program, if memory serves, is a series. It's a program by which the federal government makes available to local police departments, but also to task forces, which is where a lot of this shit goes, surplus military materiel at cost or for free. So you can get a MRAP, or you can look. All this is public record. You can find it online. So you can look up how many M4s did our town get, or does it? And it's striking because it's guns, it's ballistic vests and whatnot.
You gotta drop your cash off. You got a lot. Yeah, sorry, I'm listening.
No. There's also a lot in terms of in addition to the 1033 program, the DHS actually maintains a whole grant program. In fact, if you just cover me while I'm alive, I can look this up. I have a book right here that I was looking at on this. And the crazy thing is that the DHS program gets a little less press, but it's even more in terms of money. This is such a crazy exercise looking this stuff up while playing. Hold on, I can just look this up via the texts I had open earlier. But yeah, it's all public record. So there have been some 1033 program disbursements. There have been some, like, Obama briefly suspended it after Ferguson, right? And then it went back. So they're weirdly tied to, like, drug bust numbers. Like, there's all sorts of confusing things.
I've seen the forms for. I mean, I looked through a lot of the ones in Oklahoma. The local departments requesting MRAPs, and there was nothing about numbers. There's nothing to prove at all. All you had to do is fill out a form and write on it that you were going to use it for drugs and that you were near a highway, and then they were approved. That was it. There was. I mean, the military, the government had to get rid of them. We had so many from Iraq, and we didn't want to just leave them all there, right?
Here, I've got your citation for us. Harcourt's History of Counterinsurgency and Domestic Control, which is really good. Here we go. This is just so. This is the Department of Defense. This is the excess. So there are many programs like this, right? So there's 1033. The DHS has a whole bunch.
Contact in the building. Yep, sorry.
Here we go. No, it's all right. So here we go. In 2000,
I almost feel bad doing this.
No, this is great.
This is what it's plunder.
Like a war crime.
No, man, you stay there and keep murdering them. I'm gonna keep like muling this cash upstairs for you.
Like those World War I machine gunners watching the bodies pile up in front of them, you know? Like, this is legal, but how?
Yeah, they're working that Maxim, right? Like this, yeah. All right, here we are. So, this is her Harcourt's book, and this is just about one program, which is the Excess Property Program. Has transferred more than $5 billion since the mid-1990s. 206 million in 2014 alone. Police forces across the country have stockpiled over 500 military-grade aircraft, 44,000 night vision devices, 93,000 assault weapons, 600 miner-resistant ambush-protected vehicles. This is 2006 to 2014 alone. 50 airplanes, 400 helicopters,
50
thousands
airplanes.
of Yeah. Okay, here we go. And this is so again, it's more than one program. So between 2009 and 2014, according to Congressional Digest, the federal government provided $18 billion in funds and resources to provide equipment and tactical resources, poorly written, but that's not him, there have been documents, to local law enforcement agencies. Yep. Again, like, just imagine what that money could go to otherwise, right? Like,
yeah.
I
The
mean,
airplane thing. I heard you were surprised at the airplane stand.
I was very.
What were you surprised about?
Just the quantity.
So that's something that's been really concerning to me recently. Maybe not that recently, but like how much air surveillance, fixed wing aircraft air surveillance, police departments across the country do, not only themselves but with federal help. And these are you wouldn't know unless you track these flight paths. One of these aviation geeks, likes to get on there. No offense to them, I think they're I think this is interesting stuff. But unless you're just tracking that stuff all day, then you would have no idea. With a helicopter, there you hear it, right? But with the airplane,
no chance.
Right. And they had a bunch out from these protests too, didn't like all these like not like AWACS, but like smaller ones, like doing like.
I got 500K. Should I do something with it? Hey.
1033. So 1033. So this is another interesting thing that's sort of complicated, right? I'm not sure when 1033 specifically started. I can look it up, but like one thing that I want to like just say to people in the chat, like this whole like weapons of war thing, it has always been the case one way or another.
I feel like we were doing so much better.
That was great.
So one thing I hadn't fully realized until actually my friend Jennifer Carlson actually had some research on this, but like basically after every major war the U.S. has been in, there's a fuck ton of small arms and like armored vehicles, the 20th century, of course, that get just sent back home, and a lot of that goes to police departments, but also a lot of it's made available to civilians. So like you can find crazy ads from like the American Rifleman or like not like Sears and Roebuck, but like magazines from like like 1919 being like, would you like a Browning automatic rifle? These things are awesome, like $200, right? Or and like there's a
There was a lot of
consistent.
Garand like that after World War II, too. Yeah.
Noam Chomsky
You can
just
still
said.
get these things.
Noam Chomsky just said the government still sells M1 Garands through the civilian marksmanship program.
They do, and you can get it. They also they finally started selling the last batch of like Vietnam era 1911 pistols. If there were any people in the audience who were into that type of thing. But yes, you can, and they're at cost. Like, and also there's a weird interface with the NRA too, because that program basically exists because in the early 1900s, all these interesting gentlemen who founded the NRA were really jacked in with the government at the time, and basically were like, we'll help distribute pistols. So you can actually get, they're very expensive now. They're the Springfield Armory did a line of 1903 Springfields NRA editions in like 1905 or whatever, and they're still on the open market. You can find them. But yeah, 1033 still exists. I think now it's a 501c3 or it's like a government, like one of these like non-profit government administered things. But yeah, they're cheap as hell. If you wanted like an M1 Garand, you can get it. They're not that expensive anymore. And actually, interestingly enough, there have been a bunch of cases where people have. It's a little unclear, but like sometimes they're like, particularly in the 60s and 70s, there were a bunch of like major criminal episodes that may not been involved guns from this stuff, right? So like
really?
one of the first mass shootings, yeah, the Texas water tower thing in like '65 or whatever.
Oh shit!
That dude who was a former, I think.
Oh, Richard, you lead the way. This is your show. I'll follow you.
Yeah, we're following you.
Into the dark.
Police station.
Police station is. Well, so this is one thing I didn't realize too, is that after a bunch of these wars, like World War II in particular, there's also been an influx of foreign-made weapons.
Soldiers bringing stuff
and
home.
This, yes, there are a lot of war trophies, but also there's European stockpiles. There's fuck tons of them, right? So the reason I talk about, I don't want to like make this like for my selling my book, because I'm sure I will when I'm closer to it. But like the reason we have the phrase like gun control in its current meaning is because of legislation introduced, like gun control, like price controls, is introduced by then Senator John F. Kennedy in like '58 or something. Basically, because this Smith and Wesson, which at that point is based out of Massachusetts, is like, we're getting undercut by cheap imports of Italian and German small arms that are World War II surplus, and we want to ban them. And that legislation fails, but then Kennedy gets killed, and we won't get into Kennedy conspiracy theories here, but the gun that kills Kennedy is a Mannlicher Carcano Italian infantry rifle surplus World War II. And so
Wow.
that's like why it would. So then people under Johnson bring the bill back and be like, well, this gun would have, if it had been banned, it would have not killed Kennedy or some shit. Like, yeah. So, yeah.
I know a Carcano from Battlefield 1.
It's a good gun in Battlefield 1.